Hey guys, today we're taking a look at Noctua's latest Chromax cooler. This is the NH-D12L, so a lower profile 145mm high cooler, perfect for smaller form factor builds. The McPru case that I looked at last week, or maybe the week before, will be a perfect use case for this, but it's lower form factor. So included in the box, we have got all of our accessories. Let's have a look around here. Secufirm 2 mounting system. We've stuck with that for years. Obviously it's tried and tested. You've got your instructions, you've got AMD parts, and then a couple of brackets, and then presumably the same for Intel. And then I expect there's also a backplate underneath there. Yep, as obviously Intel doesn't include a backplate on the board, unlike AMD. And we've also got some bits and bobs inside here. So we've got a low noise adapter. There's also a case badge. We've got some NTH1 thermal compound, and then also a long screwdriver if you don't have one. Nice to see they've included one. Now another nice thing is that Noctua offer a 6-year warranty on their products, and they also will give you backwards compatibility support for years to come. For example, my first cooler that I used on my build in 2010, if I wanted to, I could ask them for the bracket to support the latest ones and they will send it free of charge. That's something you won't get with cheaper cooler manufacturers, so that is something to kind of bear in mind with the cost. But yeah, literally they'll support this thing for years to come, which is always good. Much smaller package than I'm usually looking at from Noctua. They do have their ITX ones, of course, that are really small anyway. But here we go. Here is the D12L. Look at that. That looks really cute. I love when we get smaller versions of usually bigger things. I think it's just really sweet. So let's take out that cardboard and get this out of the way. So first of all, it's not a symmetrical design like we'd see on the NH-D15. This is to allow for any memory that you're going to have here. You can get an optional fan to add on if you want to add another 120mm fan, but then you may affect your RAM clearance and things, so just something to bear in mind. So this is the NH-A12X25, but a rounded version of it, so you haven't got the sharp angles you'd see, so that helps with the clearance there again. They've got anti-vibration pads, the usual Chromax finish, which is really very nice, a bit industrial looking as well. That's then a sleeved rubberized cable to a standard 4-pin for PWM control. Removing that fan will then enable you to put the cooler down onto the actual socket itself and mount it. This will support the usual sockets, LG 1700, 115X, 11200. You've also got AM4, AM5 support, obviously because that's the same anyway. Let's have a look on the bottom. We've got a nice smooth plate there to contact with your CPU, 5 heat pipe design. Another thing worth mentioning as well is that generally when you see the black coating on these coolers, that will reduce the performance by a little bit. If you left them as the bright metal that they generally are as standard, you will get better performance out of them. But not everyone likes that look, but you generally will see the more budget coolers with that, because obviously it keeps the cost down as well. So other things to mention, this is a 2000 RPM fan, but I will be reducing it to 1600 RPM for my testing. Same for the case fans, they all stay the same, so we kind of reduce the variables in the testing. I've already tested the U12A, I also did it with a single fan, so it would mimic the U12S. That's in a pool configuration, so it would be like putting a fan in the middle of these coolers. And I've also tested the NH-D15 1 fan, 2 fans, so that would be like the NH-D12S single fan. Let me get it into the system, I'll do my tests, then I'll come back to you, talk about the conclusion, and give you my overall thoughts. Okay, so I've now tested the NH-D12L as well as the U12A and the D15. I've also done the stock configuration and with a single fan, which will what the S version would be that you can buy separately, which is a single fan. So we can also add those into the charts as well, especially as this is a single fan model as well. Very easy to install for AMD. It might take a little bit more time if you're going to use Intel, because you've got to put some additional clips and then thumb screws and standoffs and stuff, but just take your time. It is very well explained in the documentation. Also worth mentioning that if you're going to use this for AM5, you've also got the option for a 4mm offset included on the bracket. You could get those brackets separately, I've got them here, and basically it just allows you to cool the hottest part of the CPU on AM5, which is slightly lower and it's not quite in the middle, so that just gives you that little offset, which does increase the cooling performance by a couple of degrees. And as I mentioned, I've also got the brackets here, so if you'd like to see a little video on how that works, then do let me know and I can get that done. So the test system for these coolers is an AMD Ryzen 7 5800X3D on an Asus X570 Pro 2 motherboard. We've got 16GB of Kingston Fury Beast at 3600MHz, and there's also a Solidigm P44 Pro 1TB for storage. Graphics are the NVIDIA RTX 3080, and it's all powered by an EVGA 850W Platinum power supply. The 120mm fans on these coolers, I've been fan speed reducing to take them to 1600 RPM. And then for the case of the D15, they're on full power as they're 140mm and they go to a maximum of 1500 RPM anyway. Both fans at this speed are very good volume wise. They're not too loud. You can hear them, but they're not going to get annoying during gaming or doing intensive loads, which is obviously very good. So let's look at the testing results. I saw a high temperature of 86.2 with a fairly high room delta at the time of 23.7. So that's a delta of 62.5. As I mentioned, I tested the U12 and D15 with a single fan, giving the equivalent of the S versions. And as you can see, the D12L fits snugly in the middle. So great results for the smallest cooler of the three. I also added one of the U12 fans onto the D12L to see if the additional fan will give any performance increase. We've got a delta there of 62.2, so only a 0.3 degree difference. I think as the right hand side of the coolers is not as wide as the left, the fans might be a bit too close to work to their full potential. And it also covers up body memory sticks. If you've got RGB, you're not going to see it anyway. You will pay $25 for another fan to add on, so it's really just not worth it. Also, if you're wondering, putting the D12L into the charts with the other Noctua dual fan coolers does put it more at the back of the pack, but from the testing it does its best work straight out of the box with the single fan anyway. Looking at the full chart of coolers that I've tested, this does remain again to the back, but given it's the smallest cooler of the bunch, it is doing respectable results, especially as it's only got a single fan. Pricing for this is looking to be around $99, and that's $10 more than the standard edition, so the silver and brown, just a plain bog standard one. And it's also in the middle of the single U12 and also the single D15S, so fairly well priced in comparison to the other Noctua coolers as well. Overall, it is on the higher end for an air cooler. There are other cheaper options, but these have a certain look and appeal, unlike the budget options, and a lot of the time when you're shopping with a budget, you have a money constraint, so you can't be picky about the looks there. Also, as I mentioned at the start, don't forget these have the 6-year warranty, and the support for the brackets when the new ones come out is literally unmatched. They will go above and beyond, so that is something to consider into the price. So I think this will be a really nice cooler for the Pro case that I mentioned. That is a smaller form factor, and get subscribed and do the bell so you don't miss the build with that when that goes live. That'll be quite interesting to see what I can cram into that. But I will leave links for this in the description box below if you want to pick one up. Of course, a big thank you to Noctua for sending it out for me to look at. Any more comments, questions, leave them down below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.